backyard.
It's almost evocative of the Cold War, isn't it? In terms of, I mean, I don't remember a lot of Russian TV trying to be thrown at us, but still, it does feel like, is this really a race for resources? I mean, we we'll get back to the spy balloon because there's a whole, but in terms of what's happening in places like Africa and these spheres of influence as well, obviously within Asia, it really is about building alliances, isn't it? With the goal of frankly being most favored nation in terms of who you trade with?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you can draw a direct line between the movies and TV shows and what they portray about life in a particular country and the set of values that each country is trying to export around the world. So if you talk to in Kenya, where I spent most of my time, if you talk to politicians there, if you find certain politicians, especially more socially conservative politicians, they'll say, I love importing movies from China because they've already been censored and I don't need to worry
Right.
about impure Western values polluting my nation. And I think for a lot of these countries that are trying to graduate beyond what is known as the developing world, they look at China's last 40 years and they see a model, right? I mean, you referenced Deng Xiaoping, right? There's a model there. There's an explosive economic growth that a lot of these countries would love to replicate themselves. And so if the debate is between the US and China right now, especially after several years of US retrenchment, it's becoming an easier call.
Well, let's talk about it flows both ways. And so, China's always, I think it was Kissinger that said China has a lot of possibility and it will always have a lot of possibility. So take that as you may. But, let's talk about the role, for example, of then Vice President Joe Biden. And what impact did he have on that whole sort of cultural trade, so to speak?
He was critical because it's kind of hard to imagine because we know that China is such a massive country, but whenever they started seeing Hollywood films in the 1990s, it was a dramatically under-screened country. There were not a lot of movie theaters being built.
Right.
That started to change with the urbanization of the country as a whole because there was this mass urbanization campaign to move people from rural communities into cities, and the cities needed movie theaters. So there was this explosion in screen count. And so the market started to grow exponentially around 2008, 2009, and Hollywood started to wake up to it. And then in 2012, then Vice President Joe Biden and then Vice Premier Xi Jinping met in Los Angeles, and they negotiated a new treaty that was essentially going to more than double the number of Hollywood movies allowed into China every year. So suddenly you had this kind of perfect confluence happening where China's building more screens and expanding its market that way. And then suddenly studios see a world where almost all of their major big summer blockbusters could get into China as well under this new agreement. And so it was seen at the time, this is now 10, 11 years ago, a very different political moment, seen at the time of this sort of deepening of the economic ties. And I think in some corners, try maybe like a possibility to seen as a possible way into influencing Chinese attitudes and, as you said, hearts and minds.
Well,